Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Last time on the show, Ute Heggen stopped in. She is a trans widow who has, to say the least, had quite the life so far. And we're here to discuss some of that today as we unmask exactly what's going on with the trans movement. Back with us on the show, of course, our legend. He's spent many days and nights and weekends and hours into protecting the most vulnerable, women and children, from deviant predators, from pedophiles, from men who are just sick, mental health sick. And John is a mental health expert. And John, you bring a lot to the show, obviously. Welcome back for today's episode as we continue on with Ute Heggen.
Brad, as always, appreciate it. I want to welcome back Ute Heggen. I recommend people go back and watch the first part of this episode, or this podcast, really, this series, because Ute is unfolding for us the personal story of what happened when she found out that the man she married, that she thought she once knew, was not the man she knew. And not only did she discover that he had been unfaithful, and she had two small children at the time, they did together, she starts to find out that this is not exactly what she was prepared to find in terms of the reality and the truth of her husband at the time. The father of her two small children. She discovered when he came back from a business trip, she discovered some diaries, and she confronted him with those, and he became defensive. Ute, welcome back. Pick it up at that point.
Thank you, John and Brad. So this is August 1992, just about exactly 30 years ago, and so we go through this next few days after I had discovered the diaries, and I had that night confronted him and said, what does all this mean? And he expressed a lot of indignation that I dared to nose into his business. and I sort of said to myself, but I grew up in a family of five, and my parents, of course, knew that they had no privacy. There's no private life when you're the mother or father of little kids. It's your life.
And he's your spouse. Yes. There shouldn't be secrets.
Right, there shouldn't be secrets, exactly. Yeah, so that was this surreal next few days at my parents' house. The discovery was at his parents' house. Then we're at my parents' house. and we went to my niece's wedding. I remember, actually, I had a hard time eating, and so I looked really svelte in this dress that I wore to the wedding. There are these pictures, and our kids had all these cute little outfits with the clip-on bow tie and the little shorts with the suspenders. It's August, and and so then I managed to tell my parents that I had discovered this before we left. And I said, I think I might need to leave. I couldn't get the kind of support that maybe some parents would have given. I couldn't get my parents to commit to something like saying to Neddy, is my pen name for him, saying to him, listen, our daughter and our grandchildren are staying here, and you better go back and figure yourself out, because this isn't safe and she needs to stay here with us. They were so thrown by this, and they thought that he's maybe like a drag queen, or there was really no reference that my parents, who were pretty serious, church-going people, They had no frame of reference for the whole idea. You know, they had maybe seen, say, Flip Wilson doing his female persona in that comedy show from back then. This was, going back, right? That was my parents' only reference, was female impersonators who were comedians. And they were really thrown. They said they want to support me, and my father actually cried. I remember when I told him about this, my father cried because he loved my husband as a son. He couldn't believe, something like this. This was completely foreign. So
I really want people to understand the media has so flipped the script, so to speak, has so created these sensitive men. No, these are not sensitive men. These are porn-saturated, deviant men that dress in women's underwear and drag, who have so abandoned their promise at the altar. Mm-hmm. But number one, they're unethical and they're immoral. They're moral cowards. But the media, the narrative is these men are sensitive and they're just trying to find themselves and they need to be true to themselves. Really? Okay, well, the reality is this. This man reneged on a promise. He was unfaithful to you. And look at now how many concentric circles in terms of relationships this one individual who makes a selfish choice, who's not willing to sacrifice himself and do the right thing and figure it out and go to therapy so that he can fulfill his lifelong promise. Instead of doing that, no, he's going to go find himself and do his deviant thing. And now the fallout, his wife, his kids, and his in-laws, the grandparents of his kids, are all, this shatters in multiple directions.
Oh, yes. Yes. And especially I know that it was especially hard for my mother because her context, I mean, my parents were born in 1918 and 1919. For my mother, divorce was a very big deal. They were not Catholic, but this threw the whole idea of, well, of course, you have to get divorced if your husband is violent or if he's drunk or, something like this. But this was just so from outer space, really, for my parents. But they said, okay, I said, well, I guess I have to go back with him and I have to figure out a few things. But meanwhile, I'm worried about what he's been doing in terms of having intimacy with other people on that.
That's right. Ute, people need to understand the additional layer of impact that suddenly it dawns on you. This guy might have brought home an STD or even AIDS because of the day and the time and where he was, which was the San Francisco area.
Yes, yes. And he won't be honest with me. He, at that point, I would say he was in a real physical crisis when we got back to our home, a real psychological, psycho and physical crisis, actually. And he vaguely, not directly, but indirectly threatened suicide. He told me that he had a suicide attempt when he was 19 before I met him. I hadn't known about it. I had never heard about it. I said, well, what did you do? He wouldn't tell me. I said, do your parents know about it? He said, well, they knew that it happened, but I didn't tell them what I did. It maybe was swallowing aspirin or something, but I guess he went and got his stomach pumped. But he's using pieces of his past that he had not been honest about with me to sort of threaten me, to engage in this emotional blackmail of me so that I will feel some kind of responsibility if he does something to hurt himself. So,
Uta, I want to concur. As a mental health professional trained for the Department of Corrections in Pennsylvania as a suicide prevention trainer, I want people to understand what you just said is 100% correct. Why? Because if someone intends to kill themselves, especially a man, he will do it without saying anything. There will be signs along the way, including, and people do need to know this, our hearts go out to people that are suicidal. And that's what's so doubly egregious about all this, because there are people that are genuinely suicidal, and to have somebody that feigns being suicidal, and how can you tell? Here's one of the red flag indicators. Someone who is genuinely suicidal will go into a depression. Oftentimes, suddenly they'll come out of it. There will also start to be they'll give away items. So there are certain warning signs, but rare is the time, if ever, it's just very rare that someone is ever going to mention they're going to kill themselves. Now, still, if someone says that, you need to take it seriously, but at the same time, it's very easy for a manipulator, but as you just said, I'm going to hold somebody emotionally hostage by saying, I'm thinking about killing myself. Well, now they go into damage control mode, or they cannot put or establish boundaries as they would. So he was holding you emotionally hostage by this.
right. And then the incident with the big chef's knife happened. So I'm at home. I'm trying to decide what to do. I've made some contact with the Gay and Lesbian Resource Center just to get some advice, which I actually got good advice from a woman who was a lesbian PhD therapist. She was very no nonsense. That center has been completely captured now by the TQIAA plus alphabet soup ideology, lobbyists, but I did get good advice. But the thing that really, I did leave for a while, a few weeks later, because right then in September of 1992, I'm at home with my 1-year-old, and the 4-year-old is at his pre-K program, and suddenly my 1-year-old has pulled our big chef's knife out from under the refrigerator. And he doesn't know what it is, and he's walking, toddling over towards me in the kitchen. And I'm saying to myself, what is going to happen? First of all, I was so gaslit that I thought, oh my goodness, when I tell Nettie about this, he's going to say that I'm such a sloppy housekeeper. What am I doing sweeping a knife under the refrigerator? Like, that's what passed through my head, because I was already so gaslit and scrambled. And then I realized he must have put that there. He must have put that there. Now, both of us had worked in restaurants. We knew that knives have to be stored properly. You always put a knife away. I couldn't believe that this big Chicago cutlery brand chef's knife is in my 1-year-old's hand. And so I was able to, get it from him. I was able to get it from him and put it away in the drawer where it belongs, and then sat down in a chair with him at the table and just cried. And so this is the other piece of, the ramifications, the fallout for the family, is that I was having trouble eating and sleeping, but I'm nursing my 1-year-old. I'm secretly trying to get information. I'm going in with my 1-year-old when my 4-year-old is at at pre-K, I'm going into the Gay and Lesbian Resource Center just to get some advice from this PhD psychologist who's there, giving me a couple of free sessions. And at that time, she said, these people are very narcissistic. And she was completely supportive of me in the idea that I need to leave. And so, of course, I'm thinking, I didn't have the training yet as a teacher about how you cannot have a suicidal adult in a household with children. I got that training later, but I knew that. and I then started making plans to leave. And a couple of weeks later, I left with the children. And I had boxed up a bunch of my stuff. A friend came and took it. She later sent it to me at my parents' house.
The amount of I'm listening. I'm absolutely. This is compelling. I'm exhausted for you. Like the stress level.
Yes.
The stress that you were under was unbelievable.
Yeah. And in the middle of this, I have a phone call. I said, I need to talk to this lady, Ruth. Now, in my memoir, In the Curated Woods, I call Ruth the charlatan, because this was this groomer who specialized in cash-only appointments for men exactly like my husband. She has a convenient studio close to Grand Central Station, so all the suburban guys can be very conveniently near their transportation. And I just got a phone call from her. I said, I need to talk to this person. How long have you been going to her? What is going on? I think you're having a mental breakdown. And so he gave permission for her to call me, and she called me, and she says to me, well, I don't have training. I'm not certified. I'm the wife of a doctor. I think the doctor was an endocrinologist, so there's a, conflict of interest there, I believe.
Meaning the provision of cross-sex hormones if she has a husband who is an endocrinologist.
Yes. So this in this phone call with Ruth, and this is on a landline. There's no cell phones. It's a different world back then. I didn't have a credit card. So I have this phone call with her, and she says, I have to be honest with you. Your husband is a transsexual. And there I am holding my 1-year-old. Again, I sit down at the dining room table and cry. And so, when we're talking about the effect on the children, I mean, that younger son, says that he doesn't remember his childhood. And he kind of blames it on me. My sons have been brainwashed. They think I didn't handle it well because they don't know all of this, right? I have not given them copies of my book. I will one day, but
let me just so the listeners know right now.
Yes.
How are your sons doing from your perspective? It has negatively impacted your relationship with your sons, and then we'll go back. But I want people to see this has very significant implications well into the future.
My sons were very much traumatized. I think that they actually both have PTSD, to be honest. And I used to think that I could have maybe done something better. I am that kind of a person, a little bit of a perfectionist, to think, what I could have, disappeared, left, and not done something illegal. That's illegal. You can't just disappear and not tell them where you are. I actually I went and had a phone call with an attorney about what legally is, my right. But my children don't remember leaving with me. So what happened is after the knife incident, I I said, I got to get out of here because, you know, he's sleeping. He was sleeping in the living room at that point. And I kind of started sleeping with the children in the bed in my bedroom. I almost felt like I should put a lock on the door. I've been at home with the children as an at-home mother. I had a little part-time job with an activity group, you know, doing some arts and crafts and stuff with my kids coming along with this early childhood group. And I was doing production knitting. I was actually selling, you know, because I know how to do the Scandinavian color pattern. There was this phone call. There was my mind racing, trying to figure out how am I going to leave, and calling my parents and saying, I'm going to come out there. You know, can we stay with you? And of course, they said, of course you can. If you feel like what you need to do is leave, then you're probably making the right decision. So I left in the middle of October, called from the airport to tell him we would be at my parents'. He went into his almost suicide threat, and I gave him that lecture. I said, if you're feeling like you're going to hurt yourself, then you need to go walk into the emergency room. But I can't come back with our children and help you if you're saying that. You should call 911 or go in to the ER. That is what you have to do. And of course, I had converted to his family religion, Judaism, and I said to him, and this is against our religion. And you know that. You know, he and I went to synagogue together. We had been religiously observant. And this was from a payphone at Newark Airport. The kids are at my knees. I don't want them to hear too much. And I said, and I have to go now. And just hung up the phone, got on the plane. And when I arrived in Wisconsin, I fell into my parents' arms. And I stayed there for a few months. But then what he did was he grew a beard, he detransitioned. He wrote my father a letter saying it was all a mistake. And he told me that if I didn't come back, that he would say I made all of this up. And he coerced me into going back. And I went back in January of 1993. And then the game.
This is the degree of manipulation.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and then began my 2 years of what I call purgatory, before I discovered in 1995 that he was taking estrogen, that he was secretly doing this, that he wanted that letter. He taught, you know, then it was all this business about the Blanchard protocol.
He went right back into it after he grew the beard, said he was detransitioning, and then went right back at it again after he got you back in the house.
8 months later.
Wow, this is a compelling story that goes on, and I'm John. I'm not sure we're going to have enough time to tell all this. We've got about 3 more minutes left in this episode. Maybe we should be saving this part for part 3 of this amazing journey with Ute.
We're going to have to. Ute, the clock is always our great nemesis here. Would you be willing to come back? And we're going to pick this story up where we're leaving it off here. It's a cliffhanger.
Well, I'm alive. We're all alive.
Very good. Right. If people want to reach out and get a hold of you, how can they do that? You're a resource and a shoulder to cry on for trans widows. How can they get a hold of you?
So my blog has a contact form on it. That my blog is Ute Heggen grasswidow.wordpress.com. And I have essays up there. I have a lot of the new more based information, posted. There's also a contact form at my blog, and I can be emailed through that. If you are having trouble finding it, you can write a comment under one of my videos at Ute Heggen YouTube channel to convince me that you are a bona fide trans widow or mother of rapid onset gender dysphoria child. I'm getting inquiries from both other women in my shoes and mothers of these kids who have been sucked into this cult.
That's right. Or they can also reach out to us. Anybody can send us contact information. You can reach out to Ute, and we will certainly forward that to you, Ute. And that is unmaskingthetransmovement.com. Ute, thank you. We're going to have you back. We're going to continue this because there are also tremendous insights that you've gained, and you have some hard-hitting information and questions that will be very, very compelling as we continue on with the discussion. Brad, thank you.
You're very welcome to both of you. Ute, thanks a lot for being here again, and John, always a pleasure. A cliffhanger is right. I didn't think I'd be saying this at the end of this show, but I am interested to hear where this goes next, especially since he made a commitment to detransition, have you back, and where it goes from there. Till next time, I'm Brad Wilder. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Mueller. I'll see you next time.